You are currently the victim of the most brilliant, invisible heist ever pulled off. No one picked the locks to your house. No one hacked into your bank accounts. You haven't lost a single dollar. But day by day, year by year, something infinitely more valuable is being quietly siphoned away from you. And the craziest part? You've been trained to accept it as completely normal. To understand exactly what is being taken from you, I want you to picture something. You open your eyes, but there's no blaring alarm clock. The room is filled with natural sunlight. It is perfectly quiet. There are no unread emails from your boss waiting on your phone, no urgent deadlines hanging over your head, and nowhere you absolutely have to be. You stretch, take a deep breath, and ask yourself one simple question. What do I actually want to do today? For most of us, this sounds like a fantasy. We've been conditioned to believe that mornings like this are a rare luxury, reserved only for a 2-week vacation or that distant finish line of retirement. But the truth is, for the vast majority of human history, people didn't have an office schedule, a manager, an alarm clock, or the deeply ingrained idea that your entire existence should revolve around a standard work week. They didn't steal your money. They stole your time. To be exact, they stole roughly 90,000 hours. That is the average amount of time a modern human being hands over to the concept of work. But wait a second. Didn't they promise us that technology was going to set us free? Back in 1930, the brilliant economist John Maynard Keynes looked at the booming factories, the new tractors, and the rapid rise of industrial machines. He ran the numbers and made a very confident prediction. He stated that by the year 2030, thanks to the explosion of technological progress, human beings would be working a maximum of 15 hours a week. Look around you today. We have artificial intelligence, robotic vacuums cleaning our floors, instant global internet, and advanced automation. Human productivity has multiplied over and over again. By that logic, we should be swimming in free time. We should be living that 15-hour work week. Instead, what did we actually get? We got trapped. We are sitting in office chairs for 40, 50, or even 60 hours a week, answering work messages on weekends, and stress-eating fast food while sitting in gridlocked traffic. So, where exactly did we take the wrong turn? How did we become so incredibly productive, yet so incredibly exhausted? To understand how we actually got here, we have to unlearn almost everything we were taught in high school history classes. We have to rewind the clock, descend deep underground, and take a very close look at the bones of our ancestors. Now, right about here, I know exactly what some of you are thinking. Before you pause this video and rush down to the comments to type, "You're crazy. Ancient people died at 30 from a minor scratch and lived their lives in constant, terrifying fear." Let's stop and look at the actual facts. It is true that the average life expectancy back then was brutally low, but that number is a statistical illusion, dragged down by high infant mortality. Without modern medicine and antibiotics, surviving childhood was essentially a biological lottery. The world was dangerous, and it did not forgive mistakes. There were still untreatable diseases, severe injuries, and very real threats in the wild. But here is the crucial distinction that changes everything. If a prehistoric human managed to survive their childhood and teenage years, they didn't just suddenly expire the moment they hit 30. They had a very real, scientifically proven chance of living well into their 60s or even their 70s. They were not primitive, terrified creatures shivering in the back of a dark cave, paralyzed by fear. They were highly capable, deeply adapted humans who understood their environment perfectly. To understand how they actually spent their time, we have to look at one of the most fascinating anthropological studies of the 20th century. In the 1960s, a researcher named Richard Lee traveled to Botswana to live alongside the Jew Hawansi, a group of the San people. At the time, they were still living a traditional hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Lee went in with a stopwatch, a notepad, and an assumption. He fully expected to witness a harsh, exhausting, sunrise to sunset struggle. He assumed he would see a desperate daily fight just to secure enough calories to keep breathing in an unforgiving environment. Instead, what he actually recorded completely changed how we see history. Lee discovered that the adults in this society spent an average of only about 15 hours a week acquiring food. Let that sink in. 15 hours a week. That is less than 2 standard workdays for a modern employee. Now, to be completely fair, we have to add some necessary context. That 15-hour metric mostly accounted for the direct acquisition of food, the actual hunting and gathering. It didn't necessarily include the time spent cooking that food, meticulously repairing their tools, or taking care of basic camp chores. But even when you factor in every single daily task required to keep the tribe alive, the fundamental nature of their effort was different from what we call a job. Their labor was not a mandatory, unbroken 40-hour grind inside a cubicle. It was built on a natural biological rhythm. Their lives consisted of short, highly intense bursts of necessary effort, naturally followed by incredibly long, guilt-free pauses. Now, you might be thinking, okay, maybe hunting and gathering wasn't a 40-hour corporate grind, but didn't everything get vastly better once we figured out farming? Didn't the invention of agriculture finally bring us wealth, health, and security? That is one of the biggest historical myths we've ever been told. Imagine looking at a classic before and after advertisement, but instead of a fitness transformation, we're looking at human skeletons. The evidence pulled directly from the earth is undeniable. The before picture belongs to the hunter-gatherer. When anthropologists examine their bones, they find tall statures and robust, dense skeletal structures with very few signs of repetitive physical trauma. In many of these groups, they had surprisingly healthy teeth with significantly fewer cavities. Why? Because their diet was rich, highly varied, and not constantly built around a diet based mostly on grain. Now, look at the after picture, the early farmer. When we examine the remains from some of the very first agricultural societies, the physical decline is striking. In many early farming regions, human beings literally shrank. They became noticeably shorter, physically weaker, and began suffering from the harsh effects of daily, repetitive labor. Their bones tell a painful, exhausting story. Archaeologists routinely find worn-out knee joints and spines deformed by severe arthritis, the physical toll of endless hours standing bent over a field, swinging a heavy hoe. And their mouths were often riddled with severe cavities and dental decay, a direct biological reaction to shifting to a heavy, carbohydrate-loaded agricultural diet. Yes, on a macro, species-wide level, the agricultural revolution was a massive success. It gave us reliable food surpluses. It allowed us to settle down and build the very first cities. And it triggered a massive, unstoppable explosion in population growth. But for the individual human being living through it, the personal price was terrible. We essentially traded a dynamic, diverse lifestyle for a lifetime of repetitive manual labor, poorer daily nutrition, new diseases, and a constant dependence on the success of the next harvest. So, if ancient humans weren't working the fields from dawn to dusk before the invention of agriculture, what exactly were they doing with their days? Think about your own life for a second. What do you do when you finally finish all your mandatory tasks, close your laptop, and your time is truly your own? You exhale, you relax, you engage in a hobby, you create something. It turns out, human nature hasn't changed at all. Deep inside a cave in Germany, researchers found a physical piece of proof that destroys the myth of ancient humans living in a state of constant, panicked survival. They found a small flute, carefully carved from the wing bone of a vulture. It is roughly 40,000 years old. Think about the sheer amount of focus and effort required to create a functional musical instrument from scratch. Someone had to sit down, carefully prepare that bone, and then patiently, meticulously, drill perfectly spaced holes using nothing but crude stone tools. They had to understand pitch. They had to understand acoustics. A person who is desperately starving to death does not sit down by a fire
to craft a perfectly tuned musical instrument. A society constantly on the brink of collapse does not walk miles to collect shells for intricate jewelry, and they don't spend days painting magnificent, shaded animals on cave walls.
Ancient people created art, decorations, and music for one very simple, undeniably human reason. They had enough free time to do it. Let's try an experiment. Let's reconstruct a single day in the life of an average human 30,000 years ago. The sun comes up, and the morning starts slowly. Nobody is sprinting out of their shelter, panicking that they are late, or shouting that they are behind on a critical deadline. There is no artificial rush. In fact, if the tribe had a highly successful hunt, or gathered a surplus of food the day before, nobody is going anywhere. Today is, by default, an official day off. When it was time to secure food, the approach was incredibly strategic. It looked nothing like the frantic chases you see in movies. They used our greatest evolutionary advantages: intelligence, endurance, and deep teamwork. Sometimes, this meant using persistence hunting. Humans are far from the fastest animals on Earth, but because we have the unique biological ability to sweat and cool our bodies on the move, hunters could track a target at a steady, relentless pace. They would simply follow an animal under the blazing sun until the prey overheated, exhausted itself, and gave up. But most of the time, survival wasn't even a dramatic chase. It was a calm, highly calculated mix of gathering seasonal plants, reading the environment, and cooperating seamlessly as a group. Once the food was brought back and shared, the productive part of the day was essentially finished. Usually, this happened by the early afternoon. So, what happened next? For a modern worker, this is the hardest part to comprehend. A massive chunk of their day was dedicated to simply being together. They spent hours engaging in deep conversation, playing games, grooming each other, and exchanging elaborate stories. If you did this today, the modern hustle culture would immediately label you lazy. We are trained to view sitting around and talking as a waste of productive time. But for our ancestors, this social time was the ancient version of a safety net. In a world with no currency, no legal contracts, and no government programs, your relationships were your ultimate insurance policy. Your empathy, your cooperative nature, and even your ability to tell a good joke were what kept you alive. Because if the tribe liked you, and if they valued your presence, they would gladly share their food with you when you were injured, sick, or simply had a bad day gathering. You didn't invest in the stock market. You invested in people. Now, compare that brilliant system of mutual support to the reality we have accepted today. We spend our days exhausted, isolated inside our apartments and houses, staring at glowing screens. Many of us don't even know the first names of the neighbors living just on the other side of our walls. We have built the most technologically advanced, hyper-connected civilization in history, and yet we are currently facing a global epidemic of loneliness. We might have full refrigerators, but we have lost our tribe. About 10,000 years ago, this ancient rhythm of life came to a sudden, grinding halt. We planted the first seeds. We believed we had finally mastered nature, but in reality, we had just walked into a massive trap. Think about the domino effect of agriculture. You plant a field, and suddenly you have a surplus of food. More food means more children survive, and the population grows. But more mouths to feed means you have to clear more land and plant even larger fields. Those valuable crops need to be protected from rival groups, so you build walls. Walls require guards. Guards require administrators. And before you know it, you have priests, kings, and tax collectors. The global population exploded, but the individual human being was working harder and longer than ever before. It brings up a harsh but fascinating metaphor. We like to proudly say that we domesticated wheat, but if you look at how our entire species changed its behavior, breaking our backs in the sun, pulling weeds, and defending fields just to ensure the crop survived, you have to wonder, did we domesticate wheat, or did wheat domesticate us? And once the population multiplied, the trap snapped shut. There were simply too many people to ever return to the forest. But a farmer was still ultimately guided by the sun and the changing seasons. So, how did we go from swinging a hoe
to swiping a plastic keycard at a corporate office? The answer is the Industrial Revolution and the invention of the mass discipline of exact mechanical time. Before factories, people were generally paid for a specific result.
But factory owners realized something profoundly profitable. They didn't have to just buy results. They could literally buy a person's time. The shrill sound of the factory whistle replaced the rising of the sun. It severed us from our natural biological rhythms. This was the exact moment the concept of time is money was truly born. A human being became a resource, a standardized cog in a massive machine, rented out in rigid shifts. It is incredibly important to remember that the 40-hour workweek didn't just fall from the sky as a generous gift from above. It was a compromise, hammered out through fierce labor struggles and the corporate desire to standardize human output. During the early days of industry, people were pushed to work crushing 10 to 16-hour shifts. Fighting for and winning the 8-hour workday was a monumental, historic victory. But over the decades, that victory slowly hardened into a brand new cage. We simply accepted a new mathematical formula for human existence. A normal life equals exactly 5 days a week, exactly 8 hours a day. This strict schedule didn't just take over our days, it literally hacked our biology and stole our nights. Even much later, in the pre-industrial world, people slept differently than we do today. Historian Roger Ekirch found extensive evidence that before artificial lighting dominated our world, humans naturally practiced what is called biphasic sleep. People would go to sleep shortly after sunset, sleep for about 4 hours, and then wake up in the middle of the night for an hour or two. This wasn't a disorder. It was a deeply peaceful, normal part of the human experience. It was a quiet time for meditation in the dark, reflecting by a smoldering fire, or sharing stories with family, before returning to a second sleep. Contrast that with today. If you wake up at 3 in the morning, you stare at the clock in panic. You swallow a sleeping pill and worry about how inefficient and exhausted you are going to be on your morning video call. Our modern rhythm, rigidly tied to the alarm clock and the glare of artificial light, hasn't just changed our culture, it has broken our biology. Think about the clear meaning of prehistoric work. When an ancient hunter or gatherer expended their energy, they brought actual sustenance back to their tribe. The cause and effect were immediate and undeniable. They saw the direct, tangible value of their labor every single time they contributed. Now, take a long, hard look at us. We spend over a decade in school. We take on massive debt to get university degrees, and we push ourselves through stressful master's programs. And for what? All too often, it is so we can sit under harsh fluorescent lights for 8 hours a day, moving artificial numbers around in a spreadsheet. We spend hours meticulously aligning fonts and adjusting color palettes on a PowerPoint presentation. A presentation that a middle manager will likely skim through in about 10 seconds during an unnecessary video call, simply to justify the existence of their department to a distant board of directors. Unlike the seasonal, naturally paced labor of the past, the modern corporate machine demands constant, unbroken availability. You are permanently tethered to a digital calendar. Your email inbox is a bottomless pit. Your work chats are constantly pinging with notifications, and deadlines just endlessly roll into one another. You almost never get the psychological relief of feeling truly off the clock. And this has led to a quiet, exhausting epidemic. It's not that all modern work is useless. The deep frustration comes from the realization that a massive portion of our daily grind is spent simply imitating productivity. We are trapped in a strange loop of looking busy instead of doing actual work. We write lengthy reports just to summarize other reports. We schedule meetings to plan future meetings. We complete complex, stressful tasks just so someone, somewhere, can check a box on a compliance form. So let's be honest with ourselves for a second. Let's play a quick game. Imagine a large red button appeared on the table in front of you right now. If you press it, you permanently give up your smartphone, high-speed internet, air conditioning, and the convenience of food delivery apps. They are gone forever. But in exchange, you instantly get the natural, unhurried rhythm of a hunter-gatherer.
You get a life deeply connected to nature, a tight-knit community, and a massive, unprecedented amount of personal freedom. Would you press it? Pause this video right now, scroll down, and tell me your answer in the comments. Seriously, let me know.
It is a deeply fascinating question, because a lot of people will instantly say yes in their heads. They crave that freedom, right up until they slowly realize that the ancient wilderness doesn't come with a Netflix subscription, a hot shower, or modern antibiotics. So, let's bring this all the way back to the beginning. Why was John Maynard Keynes so wrong in 1930? If machines, software, and robotics are doing so much of the heavy lifting today, why hasn't all this automation finally set us free? The hidden truth is that Keynes made one fatal assumption. He believed that human needs had a natural, logical limit. Once our basic survival was secured, he thought we would simply stop working. What he underestimated was the evolution of modern economics and the rise of modern marketing. Think about the economic treadmill. The entire system would begin to stall if we suddenly decided to only buy the things we actually need. To keep the gears turning, the market has to artificially manufacture new desires constantly. We are no longer working all these extra hours for our survival. We are working them to pay off a massive 5-year loan on a car that we only really need so we can commute to work. We spend our hard-earned paychecks on branded clothes that will be out of style by next season, all to impress people who aren't even paying attention to us. Now, imagine a different reality for just a moment. Imagine your absolute basic needs are securely covered. Your housing is secure, and your food is paid for. Suddenly, you are handed an extra 25 hours of free time every single week. What would you actually do with it? Would you finally write that book? Would you catch up on years of lost sleep? Would you plant a garden or learn a new skill just for the joy of it? I want you to scroll down to the comments right now and write down exactly what you would do. Seriously, type it out. Because simply acknowledging what you truly want out of your time is the very first step toward escaping the rat race. Let's be clear about one thing. The point of this video is not to tell you to quit your job, throw your laptop in a lake, and run off into the woods to build a shelter. That would be ridiculous. We appreciate hot running water, modern medicine, and the incredible comforts of the 21st century. But understanding the deep history of human work gives you something invaluable. It gives you a superpower. You can finally see that the 40-hour workweek is not a fundamental law of physics. It is not a biological requirement for human survival. It is simply a social construct. It is an invention. Our ancient ancestors didn't need retirement funds, 401k accounts, or diversified investment portfolios. Now, their lives were certainly not a perfect paradise, but they possessed something profound that we have lost. They had a direct, unbroken connection between their daily labor, their physical bodies, their local tribe, and their time. We can't go back to the past, and we can't rewrite human history, but you do have a choice moving forward. The next time you are tempted to take out a loan for the newest smartphone, or swipe your credit card for a status symbol you can't genuinely afford, stop and remember this. You are not paying for that item with your money. You are paying for it with your life. Every single time you choose to lower your artificial needs, you do something truly powerful. You buy back the one single asset that our ancestors had in abundance. You buy back your time. If this video made you rethink how you value your time, the best thing you can do right now is share it with someone who needs to hear this message. What is the one thing you would do if you got 25 hours back every week? Tell me in the comments below. I read all of them. If you want to keep exploring the hidden truths behind how our world actually works, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us keep making these videos. Thanks for watching. And remember, your time is the only thing you can't buy back. See you in the next one.